Alrighty, and this is Brian here, and today I am joined by award-winning comedian and filmmaker and the creator of Nelly Cootalot, The Fowl Fleet, Alasdair Beckett-King. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Brian. How are you?
Not bad at all, and I appreciate you taking time out to talk about this game because as you and I talked about off the air, this is a game that I'm excited about both as someone who has grown up playing games and certainly played adventure games when I was a child, but also has a 9-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter who I think are going to get a lot of enjoyment out of this as well. So I appreciate you taking time, especially because you are ramping up to the release of Nelly Cootalot, which is, I believe, March 22nd, correct?
That's right, yeah, March 22nd. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about it. Actually, that's one of the things that I have always really liked about adventure games is the way that because they are less based on quick reaction times and that sort of thing, they are things that, husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends and fathers and sons and mothers and daughters, the things that people play together, sort of like, watching a movie or a TV show. And that's the way I've always played them, and I really like that about them.
And I think that as you sort of look at the gaming landscape today, I mean, the game, as I mentioned before we started recording, the game that I play a lot with my 9-year-old son now is Minecraft because it's so accessible and it's so all ages friendly. But the landscape of games is really not that sort of family friendly or all ages friendly. Most of the games that are out there today are really aimed at more of a hardcore audience, and even a lot of the adventure games are aimed at more of the hardcore, really difficult puzzle solving audience as opposed to all ages and games that families can enjoy together. So I think anytime there's an entry into the genre that is that accessible, it's something that we want to talk about. So for people who have never heard of Nelly Cootalot, this is a game that has a multi-year history and started out as a freeware property. Can you just talk a little bit about how Nelly Cootalot came about?
Yeah, well, back in, I want to say the olden days, because it really feels like the olden days. Back in 2006, when it was all, wooden wagons pulled by donkeys and that sort of thing.
Yes.
I made 2007 actually, I released it. I started out making an adventure game for my girlfriend, whose nickname is Nelly Cootalot, and who likes pirates. And so it was simple as that. I decided I'd make her a little adventure game as a birthday present. But then it took too long and I missed her birthday and it became a Christmas present. And then it became a next birthday present after that.
Well, I think anybody who does anything creative knows that the time frame that you set up in your head for whether it's writing a story or putting an album together or whatever rarely sort of sticks to that. But what made you want to go down the route of game development? I mean, that's a huge undertaking to not only for a gift, but as a creative project. I mean, it's so much more to it than the writing of the script or designing the artwork. I mean, there's so many pieces to putting a game together. Did you have game developer experience at the time?
Well, sort of. I think it was actually the second adventure game that I had made for her, but the first was even more obscure and I'm sure is lost on an old hard drive somewhere in a landfill somewhere. But yeah, it's one of those things that, like many a geeky kid, I would just sort of try and make games. In spare time, and they would rarely come to anything. A variety of kinds of games, but I mainly spent my time trying to make adventure games when I was at school, with no successful results whatsoever. And so it seemed like, as someone who did animation and film stuff and was into writing and comedy, it seemed like a sensible way of putting all of those interests together. It turned out to be a really huge waste of time, an enormous drain on my emotional well-being. But I didn't know any of that at the time. It just seemed like it would be fun.
And what was her initial reaction when she saw the finished product for the first time?
I think she liked it. I hope she liked it. She did. She really liked it. And what was also nice is that lots of other people liked it as well, because I just intended it as a gift for her, but it sort of got a little bit out of hand and became. It's not a huge game, but in terms of freeware adventure games, it's quite well put together, and it's quite substantial in terms of the amount of playtime. And it was really quite well received, and it got some really nice reviews and from different websites that I respected, and so that was a kind of cool response that I wasn't really expecting.
Yeah, I read a lot of those actually when I was looking at the Fowl Fleet, which is obviously coming out now, and just going back and looking at the history. It was very well respected in the adventure gaming community, and a lot of pretty major outlets had very nice things to say about it.
That was really nice because it is. I know it's a niche, isn't it? Adventure games, and so making a splash on the adventure game scene is sort of like not making much of a splash at all. But it was nice for game writers who I respect and websites that I read to sort of pick it up and go, oh, this is quite nice, which is just really nice.
And, obviously you just mentioned it's sort of a niche, the adventure gaming community or the genre in general. And one of the things that I love about adventure games is there tends to be, especially today, there's PC gamers and there's console gamers. And a lot of times you have these two camps that, will love to argue about, why one platform is better than the other, because there's a lot of games that struggle to cross the lines between both. If you, especially when it comes to controls and how you interact with the game, and if it's a first-person shooter, people are either firmly a PC player or they like to play on console. With adventure games, it is a format that lends itself to pretty much any platform, including the touch-based platforms that we have today with tablets. So they are sort of one of the genres that can span any platform, which, again, when we talk about accessibility, it just makes them one of the more accessible genres that are out there.
I mean, I think that's an asset as well as sort of a drawback in some ways from a lot of people's perspective, because the reason adventure games don't necessarily fit one platform is that they don't have that much gameplay in them. It's not about a specific kinetic connection with a certain type of activity in the game. And I'm not the first person to have noticed this, but most of the activity that happens in an adventure game happens in the player's mind while they're playing it, trying to work something out. And some of the time you'll just be wandering around or just standing still thinking, which is a weird kind of entertainment.
It is, but it appeals to, I think, like for me as a kid who grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, and was very much into role-playing games. I remember playing the Black Cauldron on an Amiga when I was a kid, and just the amount of text that you were reading and the amount of work that, as you just said, you're doing in your head as you play really appealed to the same part of me that loved choose your own adventure books and role-playing and things like that. And I think that for people who are sort of wired that way, the adventure game will always appeal to them because it speaks, I think, directly to that part of you.
Yeah, I agree, and I love this. And in fact, I did a couple of years ago. I did a Choose Your Own Adventure comedy show with a comedian friend of mine. So it was a live show where the audience get to make all the choices, and then we played them out in an adventure game I created on screen.
That is amazing.
And made jokes through it, which was just an enormously fun thing to do.
So, as we mentioned, Nelly Cootalot, very well received at the time. You decide in 2013 to go to Kickstarter for the eventual sequel of this game. How did that come about? When did you decide that you wanted to do a sequel, and then how did you make the decision to go to Kickstarter?
Well, ever since I think a month after releasing the first game, I started pottering about with the idea of making a bigger, longer version of it. Or not a remake, of course, but a bigger, longer follow-up featuring Nelly, I should say. Because I'm trying to avoid using the word sequel because it implies that you have to have played the freeware game to understand what's going on. But it's a new episode in Nelly's adventures. There are continuing themes and recurring characters, of course, but you don't really miss anything out if you haven't played the first game. In fact, you could play the second game, the new game, and then go back and play the first game, and you just pick up a few extra in-jokes, and that would be about it. But I'd just been sort of working away on that in the background while doing film stuff during the day, and then I went to film school and I did all kinds of things, and I got an MA, and I'd just been doing this sort of on evenings and in weekends, just pottering away on a design document, drawing artwork and things, and I'd been doing that for years by the time it became 2013, and I realised I'm either going to not make this game, or I'm going to properly make this my full-time job until it's finished, because that's the only way I'm going to turn it into something. And so I thought, well, I'll let the fates decide and put it to a Kickstarter, and if I can raise the money to let me do it, then I'll do it. And that was an amazing experience, actually, because there's an incredible support for all kinds of adventure games and indie games on Kickstarter, which I just didn't know about until I said, hey, do you want to fund my game? And then you find there are dozens of people who are acting as cheerleaders for you, saying, yeah, we'll give you, not only will we give you some money, but we're going to spend loads of our time trying to get other people to join this campaign, which is so weird. I didn't expect that at all. And it was really nice to have that support. And in many cases, the same people have then been sort of helping throughout the development process by answering questions that I put to them in the updates about, or which font do you prefer, by doing beta testing in the last month or so. And that's been genuinely a startlingly enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I mean, the community is extremely passionate, as you said, and I find the same when it comes to Kickstarter for role-playing products and things like that. I actually just backed a role-playing game that was a setting that I enjoyed 15 years ago, and the creators of that setting are bringing it back now and updating it for the newer editions of Pathfinder and D&D and stuff like that. But you see people who are just overjoyed to see a game in a genre that they love be put out there, especially a property that is unique and appeals to all ages like yours, and they just want to be a part of that. And Kickstarter really gives them an opportunity, I think, to do that when you have a developer or a creator who really wants to tap into that. The community is there and ready and willing, and not everyone who makes games will tap into that, but I saw just from the updates that you were posting on the Kickstarter and sort of the back and forth that it's been a very sort of collaborative mentality from the beginning. So you successfully funded the Kickstarter, and in looking at some of the artwork that you've posted and just the developer diaries and the things that you've posted as updates both on the Nelly Cootalot website and on the Kickstarter campaign, like the evolution from what you created for the first game and what this new game, the Fowl Fleet, is becoming is really amazing, and it's fantastic to see the sort of origins and what it evolved to today in terms of the engine and just the design and everything else. This whole world that you've created has just really taken a giant leap forward.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm really glad that you can see that because it's taken years. So I'm glad I haven't been wasting my time. But yeah, the sort of two big leaps forward. I'm going a bit Maoist there, but there've been two great steps forward in the development, and one of those was the Kickstarter, and the other was teaming up with Application Systems Heidelberg, who are a German-based company who are publishing and co-developing the game. And so the first game was made with Adventure Game Studio, which is a fantastic engine for developing specifically adventure games, though you can do a few different things in it than just adventure games. And at the time when I was running the Kickstarter, it was quite limited in terms of resolution. It was stuck with very low resolutions and very limited in terms of platforms. So the first game, Nelly Cootalot, Spoon Bigs Ahoy, is 640 by 480 pixels, which back in 2007 was loads of pixels, but these days is a very, very small amount of pixels. And when I started kickstarting the game, I was intending to make it at an 800 by 600 resolution, which again seemed to me to be loads of pixels, and now seems like hardly any pixels. What teaming up with Application Systems made possible was basically it allowed me to hand over the programming of the game to their much more experienced programmers who are working in Unity rather than Adventure Game Studio, which freed up. It freed everything up in terms of resolution, so we can now make a game in full HD, and it freed it up in terms of platforms, so now we can make it work on a Mac, for instance, which would be nice. And
did it let you sort of take your energy and your focus and put it more towards the writing and the scripting and things like that, because you had this partner that you were collaborating with that was handling a lot of the technical side of it?
Yeah, in fact, it's fantastic. It allowed me to just go, right, okay, well, I either make a game that's going to look very dated by the time it's finished, or I go back and I do all of this artwork again, bigger and better, and I get a chance to go back and improve it all, which is it's a difficult choice to make, because if you make choices like that too many times, you never finish a project.
Right.
But I thought, well, I have the time to do this, and the fact that Application Systems are involved and that they've significantly increased the budget because they're paying for the proper development with a proper programmer that isn't just me. So it's gone from being the £20,000 I raised on Kickstarter to sort of a three-figure sum. I don't know what the figure is because we keep going between euros and pounds and I get confused. But it's loads of money but compared to what I was trying to raise on the Kickstarter. And that's meant that I could go, okay, I am going to do this. I'm just going to go back and I'm going to make all the animation better. And we're going to have the time to do rewrites and to try and to test the game and make sure that the puzzles are working and make sure that things are sort of flowing and fluid, and have the freedom to do things like think, okay, actually we need an extra animated sequence here just to underline that plot point, and having the freedom to go, okay, well, that's quite a lot of work, but I'm going to do it because it's going to make the game better.
And this game also has voice acting, whereas the other game was primarily text-based.
Yeah, well, that's been the by far the most exciting and enjoyable part of production. We've worked with, there's an English voice pack which I did, and a German voice pack which has been produced by Application Systems, and somehow we've both managed to get really pretty bloody strong casts. I've worked with some very, very experienced voice actors who've been, people who've been doing voices on video games that I've played for years, TV shows and cartoon shows that I watched. Sue Sheridan, who you won't know her name, she died very sadly last year, but she voiced Trillian from the original Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio series,
okay.
which I don't know if that means that much in America. But that was such a huge impact on me when I was a kid, and so to meet the woman who provided the voice for Trillian was just fantastic, and she was an absolutely wonderful lady, and so talented, so able to do such a wonderful array of voices. And perhaps most notably, Nelly's sidekick, Sebastian the Coot, is played by Tom Baker off of Doctor Who.
I saw that, and I know that we have a lot of listeners who are very familiar with the newer incarnation, and what's always impressed me about the Doctor Who community is that they go back and they do their research and they do experience all of the previous Doctors. But for me, Tom Baker was my Doctor. I was born in 74, and on public television here in the States, I was watching Doctor Who with Tom Baker when I was a child, and so he was where Doctor Who started for me. So as soon as I saw his name was associated with the game, like that immediately resonated with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he is to Doctor Who what Connery is to James Bond.
Yes.
I think there are loads. Everyone has their favourite, but if there's one that you need to illustrate the character, Tom Baker is it. And yeah, a childhood hero of mine. So it was absolutely fantastic to meet him. And one of the things is people were saying things like, "Are there going to be loads of Doctor Who jokes in the game?" And well, there's not that many, because I really didn't believe that we were going to get Tom Baker to do it. So I had to write the script first. And,
right.
And we had to go and meet him because, I don't bring Tom Baker to me. I go to him.
Exactly.
And like in the middle of a field somewhere. And in a recording studio, and I was convinced we were not going to meet him, but we did. And we spent a lovely recording session, and he's extremely funny and delightful, and said all kinds of utterly unrepeatable things, which I couldn't possibly say on a family-friendly podcast video interview. And it was just a wonderful experience. But yeah, being able to bring the story to life and bring characters who I've been sort of knocking around for years now, with people who I've been watching on TV and listening to on the radio since I was a kid, was just so nice.
And I think that's something that this, from what I've seen of Nelly Cootalot so far, really sort of stuck with me, is that in my mind there's a couple different types of adventure games that, for me, they sort of fall into two camps. There are the games that are primarily built around the puzzles in the game, and so people who really like to solve puzzles and really want to challenge themselves with some of the obscure puzzles that some of these adventure games, especially the older ones, were created with, like that's their thing and they want to do that. For me, I mentioned the Black Cauldron, I mentioned Choose Your Own Adventure books. Adventure games that I played and enjoyed the most when I was a child, and even today, are ones that are character and story driven, that certainly have good puzzles, but that the emphasis is on the world and the characters and the story. And I downloaded the original Nelly Cootalot, Spoonbeaks Ahoy, and started playing through that, and what immediately struck me about what you've done with Nelly and with that world is that it is extremely character focused and a huge emphasis on story and dialogue, even the text-based dialogue. So for me, it hooked me right away as a story that I wanted to experience, regardless of the fact that there were puzzles associated with it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that's coming across, because that's something we've talked about a lot. Because I have a lot of respect for games like Professor Layton or Puzzle Agent, where it is just a string of puzzles connected by a narrative or an atmosphere. I respect that, and I have a lot of nostalgic affection for the almost impossibly difficult Sierra games of the early 90s. But I sort of feel like, well, the games that really had an impact on me were I suppose, quite obviously, LucasArts adventure games, where the puzzles were really well integrated into the story. They weren't set up as obscure obstacles. Objects weren't placed at enormous distances purely to make you walk that far, walk for ages to pad out the game. It was people were doing things for a reason. You in general, you weren't just picking up 40 inventory items for no reason and then wandering around wondering who you could offer them to without any real sense of what you were trying to achieve. And so I wanted to make a game where you know what your motives are. You've got a motive that comes out of character and story, and the puzzles are what you need to do to achieve those goals. It's to overcome those obstacles. But when I think of the most difficult puzzles from, I don't know if the original Discworld game was big in America, but that had some sort of fantastically impossible to solve puzzles. And I absolutely loved it as a kid, but I know now as a grown up, I would just either cheat and use a walkthrough or stop playing because the puzzles just don't make sense. And now I'm too busy to try and use every inventory item on everything these days.
Well, and as a creator, you want people to experience your story. And so the last thing that you want to do is get them to a point in the game where the puzzles are so difficult that they don't see this wonderful story that you have spent years writing and creating and having voice acted and all that kind of stuff. And so it is that fine line of balance between, challenging the player, but also not making a game so difficult or obscure that people bail out before they get to see the rest of the story told.
Yeah, I mean, there are great games like Riven, which have very challenging puzzles. And I think that's, I have a huge amount of respect for that. But it makes me think, I think Fez has a good balance because without solving any of the incredibly difficult puzzles, you can still finish the story. Mm-hmm. But I feel with adventure games, because they are usually, although, there are many non-linear elements in Nelly, in essence, it's more linear than that. It's not a platformer where you're exploring different worlds. You're moving through the story. For that reason, you either have to make a decision about how hard it's going to get at the hardest points.
Right.
And I think I don't want to alienate people, and I don't want to make people stuck for the sake of being stuck.
Right, which I think is what some of those old games did.
Because I no longer find it fun to be stuck, and so I want to make the game challenging, certainly, and engaging. But I want it to be a game that someone who hasn't played all of the bang your head against the wall 90s games that didn't make any sense can come to and not find it an utterly baffling experience, so that they can enjoy it as well. So and from the feedback we're getting from testers, I think that's a balance that we've managed to strike. So it's really engaging for the hardcore players, but it's not so abstruse in its bizarre, put the melon on the end of the mop kind of logic that people who come to it with no knowledge of adventure games will just quit after 5 minutes because they can't make sense of it. Right.
And obviously we talked about at the beginning of our discussion that we are within a couple of weeks now of the game, as we record this, of the game coming out. It's going to be out there in the world. You finally have come to the finish line of the years of work that you've put into this. When you look at what you've created with Nelly and you look at those characters and you look at that world, whether it's future adventure games or maybe things in another medium, have you thought about wanting to continue adventures in the world of Nelly Cootalot or continue to have the stories with these characters?
Well, I don't think I will make another game with the Nelly Cootalot characters. And I think I can't, without giving any of the plot away, I think I wrap the story up so that it's not ending with a cliffhanger, for instance. So, at the end of it, you're not going, oh, but what happens next? Hopefully it'll be a satisfying and amusing and sort of sweet resolution to the story. But I certainly have other ideas in the area of adventure games, and I think it will still be adventure games for me. Perhaps not in the interface as traditional as Nelly, But for me, it is about character, atmosphere, and story rather than. I love many other types of games, but I think you should, if you're going to try and make a game, you should try and make the kind that you know best. The kind that you have played the most and the kind that you sort of have the greatest affinity with. And for me, that's adventure games.
Well, before we wrap up, let's make sure that everybody knows where they can find out more about Nelly and what the plans are for release. Now Nelly is coming out on PC, Mac, and Linux on the 22nd of March, correct?
That's right. PC, Mac, and Linux on the 22nd of March. You can get it from Steam, or you can follow at Cudalot. I should probably spell that if you haven't heard the word Cudalot before, which is which is the at symbol, Ncootalot, and if I misspelled that, I apologise. And there's also the website www.nellycootalot.com. Do you still need to say www these days?
You know what? I probably do at least half the time, even though I'm guessing you don't. And I certainly know people that never say that anymore.
Yeah. It could be the FTP site I meant, but it isn't. It was the...
Absolutely. Or .co.uk, as we mentioned before. So
exactly.
I will make sure that we put links to all of that in the notes. So, and also when the Steam page goes live, that will also be in the links to this particular interview. But I really appreciate you taking time out. I'm excited for this game. I'm excited not only to play it for myself, but also to share it with my kids, because as we said before, there's not as many games as I'd like to see out there that are able to be shared with your kids. And the adventure game genre is one that they're not too steeped in yet. So I'm excited to have this sort of be a gateway for them to get into that genre. And I appreciate your time, and I hope that you have a ton of success with this game.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really nice. It's been one of the lovely things about testing the game is Volker, the project director in Germany, has been playing it with his 9-year-old daughter. She's the youngest person to have played the game. And it is something that, she needs to play it with him in German, of course, not English. But it's really nice that she's able to play it, and then sort of 30-year-old and 40-year-old people who've backed the game on Kickstarter are also playing it, and they're all enjoying it, and they're all finding it funny and entertaining. And sometimes they're laughing at different jokes. But the point is that they're all enjoying it, which is just really nice. It's really gratifying.
Well, exactly. I mean, as a creator, to have people be able to experience and enjoy something that you've spent so much time creating is just super rewarding. So again, thanks for your time. Hope you have a lot of success, and hopefully we'll talk again down the road sometime soon.
That'd be great. Thanks so much.